Today we woke up to some wonderful news. The final announcement for the final playable faction that will be available in Dune Spice Wars, and more importantly, that crucial early access date has been announced and confirmed to be very similar to the one that was leaked in my last video. If you didn't catch that, welcome to Dune Spice Wars. In this video, I'll cover off very briefly what all of this game has to offer when it comes into early access on April the 26th. We'll also talk more about that date and, of course, the Fremen confirmed as the final playable race. We'll delve into what they'll bring to the game and how they're different from the rest. So sit back and relax, and let's try and get through the most exciting announcement for Dune Spice Wars we've received to date. Very quickly, if you're unfamiliar with Dune Spice Wars, essentially this is a brand new real-time 4X strategy game, sort of straddling the balance between a real-time strategy game, the likes of Age of Empires, and a turn-based 4X title like Civilization. This game will feature, of course, exploration, territorial control, economic growth, combat, politics, and, crucially, spying, espionage, launching in the game. A feature that a lot of strategy games tend to not launch with, or at least when they do launch with it, it's a little bit rough around the edges. Dune Spice Wars is brought to us by Shiro Games, a company behind some really great titles, including Northgard, which some of you may or may not be familiar with. It has a really nice feel to it, and so I'm hoping that Dune Spice Wars will have that same feel. Time will tell. And hot off the press this morning, it was announced that Dune Spice Wars will, in fact, enter early access later this month. At the time of recording this video, it's 20 days from now, which is less than 3 weeks. Quick maths. And Shiro Games and Funcom have also confirmed, of course, that this will be an early access release on Steam. You can wishlist it right now. I certainly have. I can't wait to get my hands on this early access release when we can. What they haven't revealed yet is some of the details around the edges. For example, how long will the early access run for? What will we be able to do within it? However, we do know a few of the limitations already. We expect the early access release to not have some modding features, to unlikely have multiplayer features, but to be a baseline experience of the single-player game. I think that's to be expected from an early access release. I don't think many people will be disappointed by that, and in fact, I think most people like me are just keen to get in and explore the world, because it's important to note that this is the first time, really, that we've been able to step into a Dune-themed strategy game for a very long time. I'm approaching this personally from more of a Dune noob perspective, I have to admit. I'm a strategy gamer, not necessarily a huge Dune book reader across my lifetime though. So I'm catching up on the lore, but really interested in the mechanics of this game, how it will operate, how it compares to existing strategy titles. Which I think transitions us nicely into the second part of this video. Today we heard about the fourth and final playable faction for Dune Spice Wars' early access release. On the 22nd of January, we heard about the political house, those with keen political power moving through. Next, we heard about the most formidable force on the battlefield, shady politics, assassination, and cutting-edge spying backed up by military force. On the 12th of March, we heard about the Smugglers, the third playable faction, and the last one we'd heard of until this morning. As you can imagine, with a reasonably well-armed force and some political influence in tow, the Smugglers are really all about their high-yield market and underground economic power. And this brings us to the final announcement today, the fourth playable faction. So who are the Fremen? They are the native inhabitants of the land, angered by imperial invaders, known to be fierce and relentless in their resistance. Dreaming to free their planet and potentially turn it into a lush and temperate landscape, they see the Spice Wars as an opportunity to free the planet from imperialism and take back what's rightfully theirs. Led by a roster of fairly strategic and highly supportive counselors, I think we should take a closer dive and look at the Fremen general gameplay features and their unique units, because this tends to give us the best sort of flair and flavor for what to expect when we delve into Dune Spice Wars on the 26th of April. Naturally, the Fremen will be less affected by the harsh environment that they live in, traveling further without suffering the exhaustion or attracting sandworms, that key element that we expect to play out in Dune Spice Wars' world, that sort of danger of the unknown, exhaustion, fatigue. As you can see, it's perhaps not at the moment the most temperate of landscapes. Naturally, we would also expect them to be experts in stealth, devastating ambushes, etc., etc. You get a feel for the people who know the land better than the rest, right? These sort of scavengers, guerrilla tactics, combating the Imperial invaders. It makes sense. It has a wonderful flavor to it. Let's see how it plays out in terms of their actual unique unit here, though. And like with every other release that Shiro Games have done, here we have 5. I really love the way that they've broken this down and detailed it every time, by the way. And if you haven't delved in and had a read through and you're interested in the detail and not interested in me talking about it, I'd highly recommend you do so. So again, on the backdrop of this sort of units of the land, the people of the land, right? Longer distances, the amount of time using their unique legendary ability to ride sandstorms, resupply less often and further from home, and hold up longer against superior force. Again, those guerrilla sort of combat techniques coming through in practice. So let's have a look at the 5 units. First and foremost, warriors, literally the bread and butter of the Fremen fighters. Love it. Next up, we have their infiltrators, which are noted to also be used to the desert, naturally, and they stay invisible and unheard until they strike with their 2 knives. Surprise attacks, finding weak spots. Infiltrators likely to be a somewhat weaker unit, but again, with that specialist strike, that sneaky specialist strike to take things down. Think of them maybe, perhaps, like a little bit of a glass cannon. Next up, we have skirmishers, and you can kind of get a feel for what they're putting down by their image here. They go on to say that skirmishers have a large supply of grenades, use them to ambush well-armored units, and soften other of their comrades to finish them off, right? Here we have our explosive team coming in to weaken the larger, more aggressive enemy units that maybe our infiltrators and warriors can't handle as infantrymen on their own. Next up, we have the Fedyakins, and I have to admit, of course, I'm not fully across their lore, but from what I've read here, and I note the final sentence, they only get stronger the more opponents they face. I'm a big fan of these sort of promotions or improvements or unit features, whatever you want to call it, in these 4X strategy games. I love units that deal damage to those who are already weak and that kind of thing. So I'm looking forward to taking advantage of these slightly more tactical units when Dune Spice Wars releases. And next up, we have a really flavorful support unit in the form of these caravans. Take a look at this. This is very spicy, pun intended. While this unit can fight with some rifles, its main function is to set up camp. At camp, all Fremen units, all of them, will be hidden, healed, and resupplied. As such, the caravans are best deployed near remote villages as proxy bases for an attack. So, what have we got set up here then out of the Fremen, led by strategic guerrilla warfare inspired, native to the land, anti-imperialist counselors? You can see a fairly reliable roster of units here, I think. You have your warrior, you have your special attack, your glass cannon, you have your skirmisher for removing larger enemy units, armored enemy units, perhaps. Then we have our more specialist strike. Our, shall I say, maybe advanced warriors. These units are our elite forces, stand back, and all of this is supported by a caravan, a support unit that can allow us to take advantage of what we would probably do best as the Fremen. We're less affected by our environment. We can travel further, faster, stronger, and, crucially, remain hidden, healed, and resupplied. I'm really excited to see how the Fremen play out alongside all of the rest. Of course, the full roster has been announced, and we are now but a few weeks away from Dune Spice Wars. Do stay tuned. I'll be sure to be live streaming it and covering the game when it releases in early access on April 26th on Steam. Thank you very much for watching. and I'll see you in the next one.